Most of us were never taught how to handle conflict. We were taught how to avoid it, suppress it, smile through it. And as a result, conflict doesn't just live in our arguments, it shows up in our stress, in our sleep, in our silence, and sometimes it shows up as resentment toward people we never even confronted. Maybe you've been there. Someone crossed the line and you said nothing. Or maybe you said something, but it came out sideways. Maybe you keep the peace to avoid the discomfort, but deep down you're exhausted. You replay the moment in your head, wishing you said it better or said it at all. And here's the danger. If you never learn to face conflict with clarity, it doesn't just cost you peace. It costs you your health, your relationships, and your sense of self. Unspoken resentment doesn't just stay quiet. It leaks into your tone, your posture, your decisions. It turns into chronic stress. It damages your immune system. It shortens your fuse with the people you love most. And maybe worst of all, it trains you to abandon your own needs just to keep the peace. That's why we sat down with Terri Cole, one of the world's leading psychotherapists, author of Boundary Boss and Too Much, a guide to breaking the cycle of high-functioning codependency. She has over 500,000 followers online, but the real expertise comes from decades of clinical work. She spent years with thousands of clients, from CEOs and celebrities to couples, families, and everyday people, helping them build lives where they can speak clearly, love fully, and stay rooted in self-respect. In this conversation, Terri gives us a map: how to navigate conflict with courage and clarity without blowing up the relationship and without betraying yourself in the process. If you're new here at Mighty Pursuit, we help you make sense of life by looking at the whole person: mind, body, and spirit, not as buzzwords, but as deeply interconnected parts of your everyday experience. Today's episode zooms into our wisdom category, where we explore what it means to navigate the gray areas of life with discernment, honesty, and strength. Because knowing how to handle conflict isn't just a communication skill, it's emotional survival. We go deep into how boundary ruptures happen, how early conditioning wires us to avoid hard conversations, and how unspoken expectations slowly turn into bitterness. We talk about when to speak, how to speak, and how to recover from moments when you didn't. Because if we want love to last, if we want clarity in our homes, in our leadership, in our minds, we have to learn how to face conflict without fear. And this conversation might just give you the language to do it. So Terri, in your 20s, you were a bridesmaid in 8 different weddings. True. Even when you were completely broke, even when you didn't want to say yes, you still said yes to avoid conflict. So take us back into that time. You know, what happened and what was really driving that behavior?
People pleasing, for sure. It's an honor. Hello. It's an honor if someone asks you to be in their wedding. Who am I to not say yes to that? Like, that would be so embarrassing. It was literally not being able to assert my own reality, which was I probably should have said no to at least 4 of those ugly dress experiences. I didn't, though, because I felt like I couldn't. The people pleasing was so much. And if they think I'm close enough to be in their wedding, and I think they're not even close enough to come to a housewarming party if I had a house, wow, we're on different worlds. But it would be too embarrassing to reveal the truth that you're really way more into me than I am into you. So instead, suffer through, go to Vegas, spend money you don't have, be bitter. Of course, the bride always says you're going to wear those ugly ass things again, and you never are. So let's just be honest to everybody. There is no bridesmaid dress unless it's your own dress that you're ever wearing again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. When I first came across that story in your book, I couldn't help but feel like that's kind of a mirror for many of the people listening, and kind of, if you were to zoom out, society at large. You know, there have been many studies I've done on the subject, and it's kind of hard to nail down the math, but it seems like up to 75% of people have just like a really big problem with just completely avoiding conflict, setting boundaries in their relationships, whether that's their spouse or their boyfriend, their girlfriend, in work, with their friends, parents, all these different relationships. It almost seems like your situation is like the default. And so, and I've noticed that even in my own life, it's so easy to just like not say anything or to set a boundary than to say how we really feel. And so how do you think we got here as a culture where conflict feels more dangerous than silence?
Well, I think it's home training, right? Of course, there is a societal aspect to this, but there's also familial norms, right? You grew up in a family system. I grew up in a family system that expected me to be a good girl. That really, I mean, we were all indoctrinated, especially women, into the cult of nice. It is more important for people to perceive you as being nice than almost anything else if you're a little girl. You want to be helpful. Be happy. Where's my happy girl? Turn that frown around. If you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all. This is the messaging. It's not just me. I've taught this to women in particular in 192 countries. Nobody was like, oh no, I learned that. I learned that in school. I learned that from my family. We all learned to self-abandon, right? We're raised and praised to be self-abandoning codependents. That's basically what the home training was. So we come to our boundary dysfunction, let's say, honestly, because not only did nobody teach us how to do it, we learned the opposite of doing it. There's societally sanctioned behavior of self-abandonment. We're like, oh my God, you would love Betty. She would give anybody the shirt off her back. Keep your effing shirt on, Betty, please. Like, why are we disrobing for anybody? And why is that lauded? Like, why is that something that we're clapping for, that Betty would give the shirt off her back to anybody? I don't think I would love Betty. I would think Betty has no self-esteem and has very disordered boundaries, is what I would think. But if we look at it from a societal standpoint, she's considered the epitome of an amazing woman. So women are just, we're trained to self-sacrifice. But there's a cost. And the same thing that you're talking about, where it's easier to avoid, whether no matter what gender you are, that it's easier to avoid conflict, right? Go along to get along, right? When and why are we getting medals for being easy breezy?
Yeah.
Right? Women in particular, we don't want to be the difficult chick. We don't want to be seen as hysterical or someone who's high maintenance or who needs so much. Oh, you know me, I'm easy breezy, whatever you guys want. No fuss, no muss. There's a million sayings that sort of support this not being needy. Now, we can probably look at these dots and go backwards in time and go, well, what did we learn in childhood? Well, you learned, be good, do the right things, don't be needy. A lot of kids in family systems learned you have adults who are either immature or who literally can't handle. That's it. You being needy would not only not get your need met, but might get you in trouble. You might get physically hurt if you're in an abusive situation.
Yeah.
So then you have a needless child who grows up to be a needless adult, partner, wife, mother. But of course, that's an illusion because we all have needs. And the chickens will come home to roost sooner or later. It's just a matter of time. So I feel like you're seeing a lot with women hitting perimenopause and menopause, hitting a wall. And it's just the one thing that just tips the whole thing over. Where there's this thing happening online right now where this woman created this. It was kind of, for fun, sort of the We Don't Care Club. And it's for perimenopausal, menopausal, and postmenopausal women. And it is blowing up all over the world, right? There are chapters in Australia and in Spain, everywhere. And it's sort of tongue-in-cheek, but it's really not. Because if you look in the comments, what women are saying, I don't care that you don't want to eat what I made. Make yourself a sandwich. Bye. I don't like all the ways that women are feeling put upon. But again, as my therapist said to me many, many years ago when I was complaining about, I was in my 20s, I was complaining about someone being incredibly entitled. Like, I cannot believe that she thinks that she's so entitled. And she was like, let me ask you something. Is she really entitled? Or have you served yourself up on a silver platter and you're just pissed that she took you up on it? And I was like, oh God, it's that.
Yeah.
It's me and my bad boundaries. And now I'm blaming this other person, but it's me. I'm not setting a limit. I'm not saying no. I'm not asserting my preference, my desire, my deal breaker, right?
Yeah, I mean, when there's like an emergence or a trend or something like that, you pay attention to it because it's like giving voice to something. I mean, like 10 years ago, that was like the narcissism conversation. So people, and you feel like it's so, you feel like you're impressed by this like thing. I mean, the language of the cult of nice, it's very strong.
Mm-hmm.
But tell me why do you call it a cult?
Because first of all, it's incorrect. We're not taught to actually be nice. We're taught to be compliant. And they're two different things. So again, it's what does it look like optically? We want everyone to think it's nice. It is not, when you say yes, when you want to say no, is that nice?
Some people would think it is.
It isn't though, because it's lying. What you're doing when you do that over and over again is you're giving corrupted data about who you are, how you feel, what you want, to the people closest to you in your life, under the umbrella. I didn't want to say no because I just wanted to be nice. I didn't want them to think. I didn't want them to feel. Listen, buddy, what other people think and feel is not your side of the street. And this is part of the problem when we have disordered boundaries, is that we are so unclear about what is my responsibility. So I'm positive my responsibility is not giving my husband wrong information about what I want and how I feel.
So do you think what other people think, is there a healthy, as we embark on this conversation, is there a healthy medium in terms of like, you could completely swip to the opposite side of the spectrum and be like, I don't care.
Yeah.
I don't care about what you think. I don't care about your needs. I don't care about, and so, between the cult and nice and I don't care about what you think, like what is the meeting point there?
Discernment, right? Because of course I care about what my husband thinks. He's the best, right? I care a lot about what he thinks. It doesn't change what I think about me, and what he thinks about me is not more important to me than what I think about me. But of course I care about what he thinks because he's my person. So I feel like the pendulum swings. So when we're self-abandoning for decades at a time, which happens with women, I have women coming into my therapy practice in their 5th, 6th, 7th decade of life and being like, all right, man, I've done it all. Kids went to Ivy League schools, son got his MBA, I'm retired, we're traveling, I'm on these boards, I go to Soul Cycle, I still kind of like my spouse. Like, I've done it all. And they're coming to me to say, is this all there is? Is this the way I'm supposed to feel? Why is it so empty? And it's so empty because if you build a life, checking boxes that someone else constructed, taking one for the team over and over again, saying yes when you really want to say no, because this is what we do as mothers, right? This is what we do. Nobody knows you. You end up being 68 years old and having an existential crisis of loneliness because literally nobody, maybe your girlfriends, maybe your close friends, know you, which is why female relationships are so incredibly important with women. But that is devastating, to get to the end of life and feel like you've done all the right things.
Yeah.
And you are not known. It is so painful.
The flip side of the extreme thing, and we talked about this a little bit on offline, is, you're seeing a trend of people who turn every single disagreement into some sort of confrontation of, I'm going to cut people off, I'm going to clap back, I'm going to turn every conflict into some sort of power play, like we're playing chess. And so, it feels like we're swinging between these two toxic poles, which is total silence. I'm going to just like erase my sense of self, and then the end result is 68 years old, like you were just talking about, or just like emotional warfare. And so I thought it was interesting. You didn't start off as a psychotherapist, right? You started off as a talent agent. And so you kind of saw the birth of like this emotional warfare thing being portrayed on television and being ushered into mass culture. And so what do you see happening there? What's the background?
I mean, I think reality television has had a huge impact on us as a culture. And obviously that's not just coming from me. That's just coming from reality of what it is. So what we get to see, this is very much sort of like the Romans and the gladiators, right? It's like people fighting it out, like the lowest common denominator. We're all going to live in a house together. Like they make up the most insane scenarios, right? And of course, I've been approached so many times to do reality television. And every time they say, no, because I always say, listen, I can't do anything that's terrible, obviously, because I'm a therapist. I can't do anything that's hurting people. Like I can't make somebody cry in the fourth segment and still be a therapist. No, we really want you to be who you are. You're going to do it. And then, of course, you film the thing and they're like, can you be more like Gordon Ramsay? No, I literally cannot, which I told you at the onset. So anyway, that was a long way around the barn to get back to what happens when we are rooting for people to fail. What happens when we're conniving, right? When you have these shows. And I'm not talking about shows where there's merit. You know, you've got like The Voice, you've got other things, which is a little bit more positive, right? Where we're like, oh, look, we're finding talent and people are having amazing careers from that. I'm not really talking about that. So it's not that all, but those are more competition shows as opposed to reality TV show like Love Island. Like what? How is that good for anybody?
Yeah.
It is not. But what it does, though, between the internet, the explosion of the internet, and the change in television, you have all of these keyboard warriors. You have a lot of our ability to even feel connected as a community gone. Because think about how it was back in the day. Think about the 50s, the 60s, 70s, even the 80s, where if you met Bob's cousin Betty and you wanted to take them out, and you took them out but it didn't work out, you're not ghosting Betty, because guess what? You're going to see her at church or at the pool or at Bob's house. Like all of this being anonymous, really emboldening the darkest instincts in people too. You know, people get these cyber balls, as I like to call it, because they would never literally say that shit to your face, ever.
Yeah.
Those people who are sitting in their mother's basement, you know, trolling. I love this. Right now, there's this thing happening on social media, and I have to say I'm really into it, where people are just outing trolls.
Yeah.
These disgusting people sitting in their mother's basement being like, I don't know, I still think she looks fat. And the person is like, is this you? And there's the person's face. And the fact that they're not even hiding.
We just had a whole episode on this, actually.
Oh.
No, but about how, you know, we had a guest on who has a large following, and they got body shamed in public by the same people. Like there was this clip that went viral of them, and you know they got body shamed by people sitting in, you know, their mother's basement, making all these comments, and it's just very it's very trigger happy. I mean, it's like we're just like throwing little comments out there that basically just completely disorient someone's world of like, ooh, your boobs are like too small. You look a little deformed or something. Like, you know, it's just like a casual social media comment, you know? And
nobody is immune. Jon Stewart was just talking about this on Trevor Noah's pod about how, he's so isolated himself. Like he's got an animal sanctuary with his wife now. He, you know, lives way out in Jersey, you know, doing his thing. Still coming in now once a week doing a show. But it's like how even when he's talking about something, so his dog died recently and like he was literally crying on the air. And then still in the comments, someone's like, yeah, Jew, why'd you change your name? He's like, what? Hello? What? I'm talking about my dog who was 15. I'm literally bawling my eyes out. And so for him, you would think, you'd say to someone that famous or that wealthy or that powerful, quote unquote, don't look at it. But he's like, that's like someone calling your name. And you train yourself to not look. He's like, it's really hard to not look.
I think it just like goes against science, actually. It's just like, it's like almost impossible not to look at that. I mean, and it just seeps so deep. And so, you know, with this picture that we're painting, you know, starting with your story about the weddings, but then we're caught in this, like, it feels like a trap, right? So we're just silent. And then the only form of conflict we really see on social media, on television, and reality television is this kind of explosive emotional warfare. And so I'm like, well, if that's the alternative, I'm just going to keep being silent because, you know, I don't want things to blow up. And then you throw the cocktail of interpersonal relationships we have, our family, how they've responded to conflict. And so it's kind of like our culture. Everything's just so extreme and binary. And what I think is interesting about this is, so our behaviors make sense. Like they make sense to us. Mm-hmm. They make sense of like, that is what I should do as a logical progression, as a form of self-protection. Dr. Albert Bandura, obviously, is one of the most cited psychologists of all time. He developed a social learning theory, and his research showed that much of our behavior isn't necessarily taught directly; it's absorbed, right? And so through observation. And so going back to what I was just talking about, when it comes to conflict, if we before we ever set a boundary or speak up for ourselves, like we've already learned what happens when people do that. And so I think, and you write about this so powerfully in your books, right? And in terms of like how this manifests with our parental relationships and everything else. And so what are some of the patterns that you feel like people, if we were to start there, people have absorbed from their environment, especially their parents, around silence, conflict, boundaries, even unknowingly?
All right, well, let's establish, according to me, what boundaries are. So we're going to think of boundaries as your own personal rules of engagement. It lets other people know what's okay with you and what's not okay with you. They're made up of your preferences, your limits, and your deal breakers. Those are what your boundaries are. So not all boundaries are created equal, right? A preference, I really feel like having Japanese tonight. Can we have Japanese? That's a preference, right? That doesn't end your relationship if your partner goes, no, I had it for lunch. Can we do pizza? You know what I mean? So when people talk about boundaries, they talk about it as this like one thing. But there's gradations of importance of boundaries. And then there's different types of boundaries. So physical boundaries, emotional boundaries, mental boundaries. Then there's different styles of boundaries. Porous, which are too loose, rigid, which are too hard, and then healthy, which is right in the middle. So there's a whole bunch of information, and I feel like it's never spoken about sort of with the nuance that would help people have a deeper understanding, hence why I wrote a whole freaking book on it. Anyway, so we are now establishing that that's what we're talking about when we're talking about boundaries. Everyone has a downloaded boundary blueprint, which is what you're referring to. So what is this? A whole bunch of things converge in our unconscious mind to make us go, this is the way the world works. This is how relationships work. This is what it means to be a good woman, a good man, a good wife, a good mother, a good father, a good provider, whatever the thing is. And so in the book, I walk you through looking at what did you inherit, right? Because these are not choices. What did you inherit? Did you have a maternal figure, let's say, who was a people pleaser? That would mean they had pretty porous or too malleable boundaries, worrying about what the neighbors think and then being pissed off that they took the person to the airport or whatever, right? Overgiving, being resentful. A lot of times this is what happens when you have porous or malleable boundaries. If you saw that in your unconscious mind as a kid and you're a girl, you are now going, oh, okay, this is the way a good woman acts. So it goes like this. So what I'm saying is that when we can look at the cultural influences, societal influences, familial influences, it could even be where you were born in the family system. What is expected of you as the oldest child or as the youngest child? That's all sort of in there. So when we reveal that by answering a whole bunch of very nuanced questions, you get to see, oh, this is my downloaded boundary blueprint that I inherited. Is this the way I want to function in the world? Is this working? So if your mother showed her displeasure by being, withdrawn in silence, right, by stonewalling, by giving the silent treatment, you learn that's what you do when you're mad. You don't talk. You just make it real chilly in the space that you're in until somebody gives in or somebody breaks down or you just let it go. So we can change those things. The most important thing, though, is to understand that you have a very unique downloaded boundary blueprint, and so do I, and so does your wife, and so does my husband, and so does everybody, right? Because it's the experiences that you had and the very unique system that you grew up in, whether you had two parents, one parent, no parents, foster parents, grandparents raised you, it doesn't matter, right? We're all subjected to these systems. We all had some kind of caregivers, and that's who we learned from. So once you establish what that is, then you can go, okay, my family was not good at talking about things, but I want to become good at talking about things. I will face my childhood fear that talking about things means that people blow up. I will unpack those things. I will talk about them. I will write them down. I will journal about them, right? We have to go back. A lot of times people we'll be like, why do therapists always want to talk about the past? Here's the thing. If I could help you heal without talking about the past, I would. And if there was a way to do it in 27 years, trust me, I would have already figured it out. So for me, I only go back if whatever did or didn't happen with you in third grade is still impacting your life right now, in this moment. And we can follow the dots backwards. And I have lots of, strategies and tips and tools that I give people so you can identify how is the past impacting your now, because that's important.
Yeah, we talked about a mutual friend, Dr. Frank Anderson. He posted something on social media the other day about this. I mean, the fact that like you need to go back, and then life coaches are always talking about moving forward, right? And so I think it's almost there's these two things that are competing with each other, but it's like, what if I'm hearing what you're saying? It's like there's a movement that happens. You don't need to just like permanently sit in the past. And I think a lot of people have an aversion to that, if they feel like they're just going to like plant there, or they might not even want to do it at all. And then they just like cut themselves. They're just like so disconnected from the self because they don't want to examine the past, or they might diminish the past. I grew up in a nice household. I mean, my parents were good, and they're good. They were good,
Yep.
And so there's no issue there. All right, let's talk about our work. Let's talk about my job.
Yeah. But what happens with your body?
Yeah.
Right. What happens? What would Basil van der Kolk say? That the body keeps score. So you can deny all you want what did or didn't happen in your life. But if there is something that needs your attention from when you were in third grade, it's going to find a way. Because the only two things we can do, according to me, when it comes to unresolved stuff in the past, we can talk it out or we can act it out. And if we don't talk it out or journal it out or honor it in some way, we will act it out. And now it's confusing because you don't even know what you're mad about. It's like displaced aggression. You're angry, but you're like, but what am I actually mad at? I do not even know. So I feel like there's something really powerful about getting proactive and going, okay. And if anybody listening is like, okay, but this is overwhelming, too many things, like where do I even start? You know where you start? You take a resentment inventory. This is where you start right now. You go, right now in my life, currently, who am I copying resentment for? Who am I holding on to resentment for? What is it about? You're going to write about it. Who's the person? What is the situation? And then you're going to say, what is my 50% of this thing? Because even if the other person is a total jerk and doing it all wrong, maybe your 50% is not confronting them, not saying anything about it, still tolerating it. We have to be able to just look and go, okay, I'm mad at my sister. This is why I'm mad. This is my part. I haven't said anything to her yet. What action could I potentially take that would alleviate me from this resentment? Because it's really cumulative, right? Older folks who walk around with this low-key aggression. They're just dying for someone to cut them off in traffic so they can just like lose their shit. You know what I mean? Because it's just accumulates over years, and it's like sediment, But that's something people can do right now to start to get rid of some of that. And where you're resentful is also most likely where you either need a boundary, or a boundary has to be reestablished, or some need is not getting met for you.
Yeah, I mean, that's so interesting. I mean, because sometimes, someone does cut you off, or in New York City, something happens, and like there might be such a visceral reaction of anger. Like almost you just like, I want to punch this person in the face. Or I want to punch him in the face right now. And it's like, it's so bottled up, but I mean, it's literally never about what's happening in the moment, right? They're just like an archetype for something that's like bottled up and repressed. Mm-hmm. And I think what's interesting about what you're saying is, if this is not dealt with, that stuff that you experience with your family, in school, or whatever, it doesn't just like go away. Like that resentment's bottling up, and then you take that into your adult relationships, your friendships, dating, professional spaces. Mm-hmm. And so I love to paint kind of the picture there and the cost there, because especially in the dynamic of female relationships, so when you observe how women relate to each other, mm-hmm. especially when they've inherited a fear of conflict, they don't set boundaries, they have all this resentment, what do you see happening around women relationships and friendships?
It's interesting. I mean, I would say in almost 30 years of being a therapist, I would say female friendships are as complicated, if not more so, than their romantic relationships. They can be, because so much can get played out. I cannot tell you how many women over the years have said to me, oh my God, I have this friend and I have to break up with her. And I'm like, okay, so why? Well, what happened? Oh my God, she's jealous, she's possessive, she's mad if I see my other friends, but all these things. And I go, all right, well, what did she say when you talked to her? Oh, I mean, I didn't talk to her. I'm like, I have an idea. Before we assassinate her, maybe we could talk to her. Maybe you could try to set a boundary, but for some people it is so impossible, the idea of having a hard conversation, they would literally enter witness protection to avoid it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So we need to remove that fear, that childhood fear and that childlike fear. And that's definitely what I help women do, is go, okay, we could do it slow, but just, you don't have to be friends with this person. Sometimes we outgrow friendships, and that's okay. I actually have a whole course on literally the friendship breakthrough or breakup guide is what it's called for women, because the entanglements can be so complicated and sort of convoluted, and they're so important. Because when you think about the way, if we're looking way back from a macro view societally, women are the tend and befrienders, right? We're the gatherers. We're taking care of the kids. We're together and counting on each other to survive, where men are more, they're out hunting, but there's not the same connective tissue that is so life-giving, and without it, for women, it's like you feel like you're going to die. You get excommunicated from that tribe. It is so emotionally and psychologically painful. There was that very famous study done in a lab where it was scientists, and when the female scientists were upset, they grabbed another female scientist, sat down, had a cup of tea, and they called it tend and befriend. That's where that phrase came from. When the male scientists were upset, they isolated. So there's such a different way
reaction
of relating to, of the importance. And I think that women are much more out about how important their female friendships are than they used to be. I mean, I have the same friends since Nixon was in office, literally 7 of us. And they're absolutely as important to me as my family, without a doubt. Same. You know what I mean? Now, most people wouldn't say that, or maybe they don't feel that way. But I feel like friendships are forever. And being a therapist, I can tell you, not all relationships are, but friendships can be. Anyway, with the boundaries and with the women not confronting, there's so much passive-aggressive communication that goes on. There's all these ways of communicating your displeasure without using words.
Without actually saying it.
Right. Take your time getting back to someone when they text you, when normally you get back quick. If you don't like what they said, maybe you just wait a day or two. They know. You know.
It's, I was going to bring up the gossip thing because I find that to be very interesting. I mean, some people don't look at it like gossip, but it seems with women, there's this immediate reaction of something's happening, and it's so much easier. I mean, men might just not talk about it at all, but it's so much easier to be like, oh, let me talk to the other people in the friend group about this rather than addressing it head on. What is that? They're talking about it, but they're talking about it amongst other people, but not talking to the person they need to address it with.
Let's make the distinction, though. In friend groups, long-term friend groups, we all talk about each other. I'm worried about Donna. I talked to her. Have you spoken to her? I talked to her the other day. She seemed really down. Has anyone else in the group? So then we'll have a side text group. Has anyone else spoken to her? I just want to make sure she's okay. That's not gossiping, right? That's not, this is how we keep everyone in check. I had a conversation with Donna. She was such a bitch the other day. That's gossiping. So if you're trying to triangulate, which is what you're describing, where you involve another, instead of talking to the person, you talk about the person, and now we have a triangle. A very unhealthy, dysfunctional way of communicating. And is bad because it blows up quite a bit of the time. It blows up, and then the person who got dragged in to the mess, A lot of times they get blamed. People are like, don't shoot the messenger. A lot of times it's the messenger who like gets in trouble, even though they're not even the one who was involved with the original incident, whatever it may be. So I think that it depends on the friendship group. Because I can say with my friends of 50 years, I really don't feel like it's shit talking. I feel like it's concern. And then if we have something really that we have to say to that other person, we will say it. Not we don't want to, but we will. We will deal with it. But again, we're also older. And I feel like if we weren't that skilled in our 30s, for sure. We're like in our early 60s now. You know what I mean? So you got lots of years of practice if you've had the same friends for a long time.
What's interesting, I mean, I don't know if you watch the show, The White Lotus.
I tried. I couldn't.
Okay, so a very, very popular show over the past 3 or 4.
But aren't all of those main characters just bad people?
Some of them are depicted that way, yeah.
Most of them are bad people.
So, but the most recent season had this dynamic of these 3 girls. One of them is Michelle Monaghan, who's like a famous actress, and a couple other people. And that dynamic you're talking about is, so it's 3 childhood friends go on a vacation in Thailand as part of this larger over group. And I guess they haven't seen each other in a while, but what would end up happening is one would go trail off, and then it would start with what you're saying. Oh, I'm concerned. But like it then ventured into like gossip. Like, so it's like there's something that like feeds us. Basically what I'm saying is like there's a temptation to venture that into, and obviously you've been doing this for 30 years, have healthy communication patterns. Right. But it like you're saying, if you don't, it's like, oh, I'm concerned. And then all of a sudden it's like, and so it would keep happening. It would be a theme throughout the entire show of they, like 2 of them would get together without the other one and start like talking and saying all the stuff weird that they were doing. So what do you feel like that offers us emotionally? Because if you really think about why that makes sense to somebody or why they have a tendency to do that, you know, even if it doesn't resolve the issue, what do you think that's feeding us emotionally?
I mean, listen, it's an illusion. I mean, even though it binds you, right? We are now binding ourselves together with this. It's the same way that people will complain about the weather. People will complain about politics. People will complain. Like, it's the laziest, right, way of connecting is doing it sort of over negative things. And people, what do they say? Misery loves company. So that's sort of what we're doing. But, you know, isn't there a saying by, what's her name? Eleanor Roosevelt about, you know, great minds and then small minds, right? In the end, it's small minds talk about other people. And there's got to be, and I have lots of scripts in my books because, of course, everyone wants boundary scripts. They don't want to do the work to figure out how to use the scripts, but they want boundary scripts. And, you know, one of them is like, if someone wants to gossip with you, how to avoid getting sucked into a triangle. And it's like, oh my God, I can't believe, you know, Betty has another new boyfriend. And my script was, oh, please tell me that we have more interesting things to talk about than Betty's boyfriend, right? Like, meaning you can opt out without being like, tisk, tisk. But it's really saving yourself, because the question is this: how do you feel when you're done gossiping about someone? And any decent person is not going to say they feel good. You know, it's not right. It's not a right thing to do. It's not nice.
It's kind of like doing a drug.
Yeah, exactly. There'll be some regret, I would think. If you have a conscience, there should be a little bit of regret if you are bad-mouthing someone. And I think we should all really strive to be above it. I do. I feel like there's ways to say other scripts if you're at the office and you're around the water cooler, and nobody does that anymore because nobody even goes into an office, but let's just say they did. And people are gossiping about someone. You know, you can say, oh, hey, no shit talking for me today. I'm on a negativity cleanse, right? Like, we can use something that isn't making those people wrong, but you're still protecting your peace.
That's a boundary.
That is a boundary.
I'm not going to do that. I might offend some people.
Right, but you can do it tongue in cheek. You can use humor. There's so many ways that you can protect your peace and not, I think the greatest power we have in life is not letting other people have the power to make us act lower than our own integrity. Like, you cannot make me act below my integrity level, which means you cannot get me into a gossip thing. You cannot make me do something illegal or cheat someone or whatever. And that's power. if we can hold on to who we are. But you have to know who you are to do that.
That's even with men, that's particularly upsetting, for if you're in some circles, and they're like, oh, just come out and have a good time and do this or that, or, there's some implications of like, oh, maybe just cheat on your wife, or, I don't know, just like these things, and be like, oh, come on, you're not being fun. You're not being fun. That you don't want to come out and do this with me right now. And they'll get like really upset because like you don't want to indulge the behaviors that they're doing.
Right.
And so I don't know, but again, there's that boundary that you're setting, and it could be met respectively, but sometimes people don't do that, especially with drinking. I mean, drinking is such a potent example of this. When you let's just say you have a social gathering, whether it's men or women or combined, and you go out and it's like, well, I want to hang out with these people. Haven't seen them in a while or whatever. And I'll have a glass of wine. I'll have a vodka, whatever, but I'm not going to have 10. Right. Okay. So I just don't want to do that to my body this Saturday. And so you go out and then you're having a good time. You have one and then you're like, oh, I'm good. But then someone in the group, supercharges the whole thing. It's like, wait, what? Like, you're going to stop now? Mm-hmm. And it's like an offense in a social group of like, I'm still going to be here with you. I'm talking with you. I just don't want to do 10.
Right.
And it's like, no, I'm going to order you another one. It's like, no, I don't want one.
Yep.
And then it gets upset. And so like, these are like the real world scenarios of like putting up a boundary in social dynamics that people are hit with. So, yeah.
So what do you say? So let's go back to the bar situation. You can be funny. Someone's like, you have another one. You're like, absolutely nope. Actually, I hit my limit. You can lie. You can say, you can not drink at all and say, I'm on medicine right now. I can't drink, right? Whatever you need to do, this is what I say. Eventually we get good. The more you want to get good at boundaries, it's like a language. You can become fluent. You have to work at it. You wouldn't expect to be fluent in Russian just because you really want it to be, right? You'd know you need to learn how to speak the language. Whatever you need to do to stop doing things you don't want to do that feel against your own best interest, right? That are not in your best interest. Drinking when you don't want to drink is not in your best interest. So if you said, you know what, I just told them I was on antibiotics, so they would just get off my back, I'd say, good for you. You're not going to do that every time. You don't need to do that every time. But your commitment to not being persuaded, your commitment to not doing something you don't want to do is the beginning of change. So people will be like, well, that's not very therapeutic. You're telling me to lie. I'm like, listen, I don't care how you have to get there in the beginning, because once you start really honoring the way that you feel, you power pivot away from that people-pleasing lifestyle. You really get it that it's not funny. Your friend hassling you is not cool. You don't appreciate it. Why do they give a shit? You don't care if they drink 20 vodka and sodas. Enjoy. But why are they trying to control you? Which they are. And it's your job to not be controlled by anybody. So again, we can use humor. And in situations, like let's look at other social situations that people who are listening or watching might find themselves in. We have this hot political situation where people don't not know how they feel, right? People voted or didn't, that's a whole thing. But how do you, so I have family members who are mixed with what they decided they would do with their lives. One uncle in particular always trying to goad me into political conversations. I'm always like, no thanks. I literally just put my hand up in his face. Nope, but thanks for asking. No, I will not be having any of that today. I'll kid. I'll say, Uncle Mike, there's literally nothing you could say that would make me get into this conversation with you. Literally no. I'll say, and if you don't stop trying, I'm going to leave, and I will. So part of it is, once I became so committed to being like, there's no point in having this conversation. I'm not changing his mind. He's never changing my mind. I have to live with it. I got to see this person at least twice a year, probably. And I used to like them. So I'd like to not know any more about them that will make me not like them. My resolve that he did not have the power to make me get into this conversation that I knew would get ugly, I didn't feel resentful of him anymore because I felt I could count on myself to not do it. So you have every right If you're out and people are trying to goad you into conversations you don't want to have, and then you'll have some people who will be like, why not have the conversation? Because I don't want to. That's why. If I wanted to, I would. And if you want to, go for it. But most of us, when you're talking with people who are diametrically opposed, we're not changing minds. We're just seeing crap we can't unsee about people that we need to have relationships with,
Yeah, I mean, some people, I love what you're talking about with, your uncle, because some people would say you can't have peace or agree across difference. And they're very strong about that,
I mean, it depends on how much of an activist you are, how much responsibility you feel for trying to change my uncle's mind. Maybe, I just know it's not possible. And it's not worth a night of my life trying to do it. And then the same uncle who told me that Martin Luther King was a rabble-rouser. Okay? So no, I'm not changing that guy's mind, and I don't want to know any more about what he thinks about anything. Thanks. I'll see you at Thanksgiving. I need no more. And that was years ago. I was like, oh my God, note to self, never get into any kind of important conversation with this guy.
Yeah. So we're talking about, family, friendships, the closest relationships, obviously, that these patterns then show up in our spouse, our partner, our boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever. Do you feel like the dynamics that we were just talking about in that type of relationship are different than a family or friendship? And how would we approach conflict? Because it's like now there's a barrier that's broken. Like we might feel comfortable doing things that we would never do to our parents or our.
You mean online?
No, with a spouse or a boyfriend or a girlfriend.
Yep.
We might be comfortable saying things in a way that, if someone had a camera in our house, they'd be like, oh, what is happening right now? Mm-hmm. And so what would you say about that in terms of navigating the conflict?
Here's the thing. Your person, if you want to have a long-term relationship, I've been with my husband 27 years, that person needs to be important to you. How they feel, what they think. You need to be polite. You need to be nice. You want to make the distance, grasp that your partner does not work for you. You do not work for them. They do not work for you. You do nice things for each other because you want to, because you're willing to. But it's that whole thing where people are like, well, I treat my partner the worst because I can. Don't. That will scratch away at the foundation of a good relationship and makes people ripe for having affairs, right? This is voluntary. This is every day. You choose it every day or you don't. But a relationship that is not tended to in a kind way with compassion and a desire to understand, I don't see them lasting, right? So the important things in a relationship, especially with boundaries, telling the truth about how you feel, asking for what you need, caring about what your partner needs and wants, understanding the difference between a boundary and control. Because when we were off camera the other day talking, we sort of came up with a scenario of what does it look like? Because a lot of times now that people know the word boundary, even though they don't know what it is, they're using it all the time. Like I was telling you that one of my clients said that her boyfriend said, this is my boundary. When you're out with your friends, I need you to call me every hour because I'm insecure. And I said, oh no, but that's not a boundary. That's a bid for control, and it's up to you whether you want to give that to your partner or not, right? That's not a boundary though. So clarity, when we're talking about boundaries, I'm talking about my side of the street. I'm setting a boundary. I'm telling you what I'm willing to do. I'm telling you the limits. I'm telling you what my preferences are. Those are my boundaries. And if you look at preferences, desires, limits, and deal breakers, according to me, that makes up your boundaries. But it also makes up who you are in life, right? Like nobody can tell you what your right deal breakers are. When I was younger and I was gotten to recovery young, I was dating people, I would say to my friends, but don't set me up with anyone in the program. Just one addict in this relationship is enough. That's it. I can't have two. My friend's like, why are you so judgmental of people in 12-step? I'm like, I'm not. It's literally my preference. I don't want someone whose drinks I got to be watching. That's it, But that was a deal breaker for me, and I had every right to have that, right? That's my choice. I don't need to explain it to her, and I didn't. So I think that people need to figure out what those things are, and then within the relationship, be able to share them, get curious, talk about what your preferences are, understand what your pain points of your partner are, right? You have your activation points, your wife has her activation points. We can call them triggers. I don't like to, because everyone talks about trauma and triggers. They don't know what they're talking about. So I don't want to say it that way, because not everything that activates us is a traumatic trigger, right? But maybe something reminds you of something that was painful from your childhood, and it would be good. So if you have an abandonment wound and your wife and you have a fight about something, it would be great if she didn't just leave the apartment and slam the door without saying goodbye. Because if she did that, she's probably going to activate your abandonment wound. And even if you're mad, and even if you're in a fight, when you love someone and you know they got that wound, you go, all right, babe, I'm just getting some air. I'm literally going to walk around 34th Street twice, and then I'm coming back. So we tend to each other's wounds, not because we're responsible for them, but because that's the compassionate thing to do.
Yeah, I mean, I think in a romantic relationship, at least in a healthy one, you have a power dynamic that is equal. And one of the things we were talking about offline is that often the most terrifying boundary setting, I don't want to initiate any sort of conflict type of relationship, happens at work.
Yeah.
And it's unique because your boss controls your paycheck, controls your reputation, controls if they fire you and you try to go get another job.
Yep.
And so you saw the stuff that happened in Hollywood. In the worst scenarios, you get stuff like Me Too, right? So because basically you have very, very powerful people. They're the gatekeepers to the movies. You put up a boundary, they're going to sabotage your entire reputation.
Which we all know that happened with Harvey Weinstein.
Yes. That's literally what happened.
Actually.
Okay, so that's probably the most extreme version of that, or venturing on that, but it's a spectrum. I mean, everybody kind of feels that same thing about, I don't run my own life. That's kind of I sometimes people want to be entrepreneurs. It's like, I don't want to deal with that. And they feel powerless in the workplace. And so what's your take on that? Like navigating that type of situation?
Well, if we're doing it from a boundaried point of view, right? Like, how do you set boundaries when there's a power differential is really the question, right? When someone has the power to take away your money and to fire you, are you going to set boundaries with that person in the same exact way that you would with a coworker or a subordinate? No. You're most likely not going to, unless you can afford to lose your job. So, not to mention, there's a certain amount of respect, right? When someone has power over you, it's just like in the military, right? That this rank is higher than this rank is higher than this rank. And work-wise, I'll have younger folks, ask me online, how do I tell my boss, he's so narcissistic, to stop talking to me about his personal life? Like, I'm not interested. I don't care. I'm like, I don't know that you can. You can try. But if your boss is as narcissistic as you claim, he will most likely fire you because it'll be a narcissistic injury that you're not interested in his completely fascinating life, according to him. So I will always preface any advice by saying, the most important thing is, how badly do you need this job? Do you have 6 months money in the bank? If you don't have this job, can you survive until you get a new job, right? Because again, it could get you fired. And I'm not saying you can't go to HR. Of course you can. There's different. It depends on how big the company is and what the rules and the regulations are. But you really want to look at the culture of a company before you join, to the best of your ability. And even go on sites that, the Glassdoor and all these other places that I feel like some of that is like sour grapes, where they complain anonymously about places. But if you go there and there's 90 of them and 84 of them say it's a toxic work environment, it probably is, right? So you want to check it out before you take a job, because it's harder once you're there to establish those boundaries. With coworkers, it's different. With subordinates, it's different, right? If your coworker, if Bob from accounting is inappropriate or keeps eating your food in the fridge, you can certainly be like, hey, Bob, I have a simple request that you keep your dirty mitts off my food, or whatever it is you want to say, because Bob doesn't have the power to fire you. So again, it's very important, the relationship and the power dynamic that we're talking about.
Yeah, one of the problems that we're trying to solve with this, company and this podcast, I talk about this idea of like fragmentation and the inability to see how all these different areas of life are disconnected from each other. And so mental health, maybe that means that when we treat mental health conditions, we're just like, oh, just take some medication, you're going to be fine. But then you don't actually examine what you believe about the world. You don't go to therapy. There's a number of things you need to take. And when I hear this about conflict and setting boundaries, there are so many other aspects of life that tie into this, which makes it so complicated. So if you talk about conflict in isolation, it can feel very empowering. And it's like, okay, I just need to do this. But then you start pulling in my financial security, my money, my purpose, my sense of calling. And so like there's all of these different things that are thrown into this bucket of like considerations. And I love what you're doing here is you're considering all of them, because how much money do you have in the bank? Can you afford to leave this job? And so it's like my conflict resolution skills are now pitting up against my financial security. And I need to be able to resolve them simultaneously in a way that works for my life. And that's why it's hard to give a one-size-fits-all answer for everybody to these things.
Absolutely.
Because there isn't.
Which is why everything that I teach around boundaries, it's you answering all of these nuanced and specific questions.
Yeah.
Because it's all about your life. It's all about what's okay for you. It's all about your values. It's all about your bank account, right? It's all about what can you tolerate and do you want to? And why are you drawn to these people? Because a lot of times people will get in touch with me on the internet and be like, this is my 4th narcissistic boss in a row. I'm like, okay, well, 1 time, maybe. 2 time, could be coincidence. 4 times, definitely you. Meaning something is being played out in this dynamic. And we have to know our own histories, because your history impacts your present day life, especially if you don't bring it from the basement, which is the unconscious mind, to the main part of the house. Right? What happened in your childhood? These things, we repeat what we do not repair, says Christine Oba, and that is the truth. So why do you have to be intimate with your history? Because it's not just your boundaries, skills, or lack thereof that are found in your history. It's how you relate to other people. It's what happened in your family system. Did you have, someone pass away when you were 7? How does that then impact your fear of abandonment? Like there's so much there. And yet it's totally doable to just go back and unpack it and just look at it and go, okay, well, this is the map of my life. I'm going to use this to negotiate my present and my future with a deep understanding of what I've experienced. That will help you make such better choices so that you can, instead of acting out these unresolved wounds, you can write them out, you can talk them out, you can honor them and integrate them, and then you have all these choices in life rather than it happening to you. Then you are happening to life in a conscious way.
Yeah. When I think about the examples that you put forth, I mean, my wife's sister literally just got into that same exact situation of she's working. So she had a boss and there was a boss above the boss, right? And so her boss was basically being abusive to her and fell into a lot of the same patterns that you're talking about because of the fear of like, what do I say? Mm-hmm. And so then she had to eventually write a resignation letter to the guy on top, explaining why. Yep. And it took an incredible act of courage actually to do that.
Good for her, absolutely.
And she left. And so there was like a 3-week period where she didn't have a job. And then the guy at the top fired her boss and then invited her to come back.
I love that story.
Right?
And the courage it takes. But here's the thing. What she did was for her healing, right? It's not about whether he fired him or never did anything. Her healing was going to happen anyway because she had the courage to stand up for herself. Your healing is in the asking and in the asserting, right? It's asking for what you want, even though it's scary, asserting the truth about what she experienced, even though it's scary. You hit send on that email, you don't know what's going to happen, but what she could live with was herself, because she had the courage to be like, this is wrong. This dude being abusive and being in this position of power is wrong. This is why I'm leaving. So there's something so important about looking at, it's not what the other person does that makes it worth doing. Your healing is in the asserting and in the asking of yourself.
Yeah, I mean, her situation obviously is something to talk about, and it beautifully kind of is putting into motion a lot of things that you're talking about. But if we were to kind of talk about the cost of not doing it, you know, we're talking about this offline.
Yeah.
You're in your early 30s. You're stuck in a lot of these patterns. You get hit with a diagnosis. Can you explain the trajectory that you were on in your personal life, and what happened and why that was sort of a wake up call for you to all this work that you're doing?
Yeah. I already knew I needed to get out of entertainment, though, even before the cancer diagnosis. It was just hard to do because I was making so much money. I was representing supermodels. It was like the 90s where everybody really was into supermodels, people. It's not like it is today. It was a whole thing. George Michael, the Freedom video, it was a whole thing. So even though I knew I needed to leave, it was hard to leave. But then I started making a plan to leave, and then I was diagnosed with cancer. And I immediately felt nostalgic for my life. I was like, oh, this has been so good. I don't want anything to make it shorter. Like I immediately was like, oh, whatever I can do to not have this diagnosis shorten this life, I'm going to do it. And then the second question was, am I living my best life? And the answer was, no, you're not. And that inspired all of this change, where instead of going to the gym, of course, I was going to Equinox like everyone else in New York at that time, spin classes, 6 a.m., all the things. And it was all about the size of my ass and vanity and the way my body looked. I was, again, what I was eating, froyo was like my main source of food at that point. I don't even know if people even eat frozen yogurt anymore. I don't know if they do. But we ate it a lot in the 90s. I was not exactly a hotbed of physical health or really mental health at that point either. But this was an incredible wake-up call to be like, this is your chance. Like, you can do something different. And I had already stopped drinking, so that part of my life was in order. I stopped drinking when I was in my early 20s. And this was the beginning of shifting towards actually wanting to do something that would make a difference in the world. And I became a psychotherapist and just changed my whole life after that. And my health became my top priority, because once you get a cancer diagnosis, you really get it. And it was the whole thing was really mismanaged. I had the same surgery twice. I went to Sloan and Beth. Like, it was not a good experience at all. It makes you realize, like, you know what is not owed to you? 1 second is not owed to you. When you're in your early 30s, you're like, fuck, who's thinking about death? Not me. That happens to other people. Cancer happens to you, not to me. I was perfectly healthy. I'd been a vegetarian for years at that point. I was so pissed. I was like, what? I don't do anything wrong. How could I possibly have cancer? And yet I did, and I could. But that was probably the most important power pivot of my life, to move towards, what do I really want to do? If I am going to have shortened time on this earth, do I want to be making supermodels richer? And the answer was no. I want to be helping people lessen their own suffering and elevate their own joy, which is what I then did. And that was 27 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking offline, and I think a lot of people don't realize the link between a lifestyle. Stress on the body is one of the biggest killers.
Yep.
And people don't make that link between like the lives that they're living, or even this topic that we're talking about, and how that then can manifest in your own body. And that's one of the, we're talking about the body keeps a score, but it's just like living a particular way, having feelings of resentment bottled up in your body and bitterness and repression, some of the worst case scenarios is like you end up getting diagnosed with something.
Yep.
Maybe the best case scenario is what you said up top, is a 68-year-old woman who maybe doesn't have a physical diagnosis, but I hate my life. I'm 68 years old and I hate my life now because I've just denied everything in me about who I am,
Yeah. I think, though, that we have to, this isn't just me, and it's not magical thinking, and it's not about manifesting. Because, when manifesting was really big and all this came out, so in the early 2000s or whatever, because it was, I think The Secret came out in maybe 98. Anyway, people were like, oh, you believe in manifesting, so do you think you gave yourself cancer? I'm like, I can hope not, because I don't know how I did if I did. But I really did. In thinking back, I really did feel like there was a connection between this never-ending treadmill of accomplishment that I had been on, this perfectionism that I was suffering from, this unbridled ambition. Like I was literally leaping up the ladder in Hollywood, like just working all the time, bi-coastal, never, like there was no rest, And I couldn't keep it up. And I feel like the universe was sort of tapping on my shoulder a couple of times. And I was like, yeah, I'm good. I got it. It's fine. And then it just threw me down a flight of cancer stairs. Now, in my therapy practice, I've seen lots and lots of women, lots of autoimmune disorders, TMJ, and a lot of stuff comes to fruition during perimenopause, menopause, and postmenopause, because you have a dearth of, dearth is lack, right? Right, okay. Just making sure you're like, is that the right word? Yeah, I think it is. Of hormones. And those hormones are giving you feel-good stuff, makes you want to take care of everybody, makes you want to nest your ass off, makes you want to do all those things. When you start getting into perimenopause and menopause, you have less of those. So now there's this shift. We have this homeostasis, right? There's been balance in a way, because doing these things are giving us this. Now, lack of this, we want to do these things less. We are not feeling appreciated. We are not wanting to put up with more stuff. We are thinking about ourselves more. At least more modern women are doing it that way. So I think that there is, back to your point, there is a physical manifestation or expression of this endless stress if we don't find a way to live a more peace-filled life. And that's science, that's not me. There's lots of studies that are done about what chronic stress does to us physiologically.
If, you talked about the tapping on your shoulder, if someone's listening and they might not feel super in tune with themselves emotionally, what are some of those tapping signs that they should be looking out for?
Well, how about we say, what can you do to dial in to how you feel, right? Because the tapping could be anything. It could be insomnia. It could be TMJ. It could be something physical. It could be weird skin stuff. It could be, there's so many ways physically that things will manifest. But what can you do to start to dial into how you feel? You can slow down. Probably the most powerful thing that we can do, which is why I teach meditation. I've been meditating for decades. And I started my own meditation practice because I couldn't slow down. So the slowing down, why does that matter? If we look at the studies of the brains of people who meditate, and for me, what I gained, meditating 20 minutes a day, I gained about 2 to 3 seconds of reaction time. So instead of hitting send on that spicy email that I'm probably going to regret later, I could just put it in drafts. I could go, is it worth it? I could not shove people out of my way to get on the subway, even if they're doing it wrong, according to me, even if they should get out of the door, even if I have all the right ways of doing it, and I could make them all wrong. I stopped. There was something about having that internal stillness and silence that just gave me a second to decide, how do I want to be in this moment, rather than just going through life reacting, because that's what that woman who comes to my office when she's 68 and miserable and feeling hollow, she's just been reacting to what other people need. So I feel like slowing down, self-reflection, meditation are two incredibly important things that you can do, and spend time in nature. Even if you're in New York, go to Central Park, go to Tompkins Square Park, like there's all kinds of parks you can go. Get into nature, because all of these things are so good for your nervous system, which also helps you with your emotional self-regulation, right? Where you don't have to jump. Everything isn't an emergency. We have to just slow down. And if you're scheduled back to back to back, change your day. Build in time so you can walk places, so you can have a cup of tea before something. Living like that is not living. Don't go through your life rushing. You will regret it, I promise you.
Yeah, I think all those practices, I think, people might hear the word meditation or mindfulness and get it confused. I think there's so much data now, so much data on the mind-body connection, and how all these things relate to each other, and they work in like symbiosis. It is quite amazing that like when you start practicing some of these things that might feel more body oriented, they start reorienting your mind. They help you get clearer. They help you like actually process like how you feel. And I think people shouldn't underestimate the power of those things. If someone's trying to, or is at the beginning stages of trying to set boundaries, address conflict, what do you feel like the actual goal for them is? Is it resolution with those people? Is it clarity within their own selves? Like, what should someone actually be aiming for if they're going to like, be like, okay, I need to change the way that I'm relating to the people around me?
I think that your goal wants to be known. So tell the truth about how you feel and about what you want. Because if not, you're listening right now. Do you feel seen, known, and heard in your life? And in what relationships do you not feel that way? Do you feel marginalized? Do you feel undervalued? Do you feel underappreciated? Do you feel under-listened to, let's say? And those are the relationships that most likely will need your attention. Because the goal isn't, we can't have a goal necessarily of resolution, right? Because what someone else does on their side of the street is not us. It's such an important aspect. And the second book that I wrote is called Too Much, and it's on breaking the cycle of high-functioning codependency. And these two concepts of disordered boundaries and codependency are so interwoven in relationships. People are so confused about what is my responsibility in this relationship and what is your responsibility. If someone is saying to you, you made me feel this way, you're like, did I? Is that me? And the answer is no. How they feel, for a million other reasons, a lot of times that has nothing to do with you. Now, it doesn't mean you can't resolve a conflict. They could say, I don't like the way that your tone of voice. You can take that into consideration, but you are not responsible for how other people feel. So I think that having resolution can't be it, because that means we would then have the power to control the other person too.
Yeah.
Your sister-in-law is a perfect example of what the goal is. The goal is to honor how you feel, what you experience, what you want. So she honored what happened. She honored the truth of what happened by writing that letter and having the courage to send it.
Yeah, I think that's such a good understanding, because, we talked online, what is the difference between boundaries and effective communication, and then also imposing a sense of control on the people around you. And people will get confused about that. And so when it comes to actually communicating, what do you think differentiates effective communication with someone versus something that might just be another toxic version or completely just ineffective?
I mean, staying on your own side of the street, we could look at nonviolent communication. We could look at, there's a lot of different modalities that literally walk you through. If you want to do it with your partner, you can look at imago therapy scripts from Harville and Helen Hendricks, which are just unbelievable. There's no way to be misunderstood if you actually use that script. It's so good. And it teaches you how to communicate, where you let the other person communicate fully before you jump in. So that particular script is the person says, I have a beef with you right now. So when you do this, it makes me mad. Then you would have to mirror me and say, okay, so if I got you right, when I do this, it makes you mad and you think I'm a jerk. Did I get it right? I'd say, no, I didn't say I thought you were a jerk. I just said it made me mad. Okay, so you have to keep repeating it until I go, yeah, okay, that's it. And then you say, is there more? How often, when you're talking to anyone, do they just literally give you the floor?
Never.
Is there more that you would like to say about that? Oh, please do. And what we learn is how to respect the other person and how we'll have our turn when it's our turn to be the sender, so to speak, in the Harville Hendricks speak, or with something like nonviolent communication. You start it with, hey, I'd like to make a simple request. Some people don't like that sentence stem. I happen to, because all requests are simple. It doesn't mean they're going to do it. But the truth is, I'd like to make a simple request that you let me know if you're going to be more than 10 minutes late. That's it. That is a simple request. Are they going to do it? I don't know. You will find out. But that is a boundary request. So we need to learn the language of this and what we want to stay away from 100% when you're like, what is effective communication? Do not talk about the other person. You. No. You always, you never. No. Let's avoid all of that. When you did not text me last night to tell me you were going to be 30 minutes late for dinner, I felt so hurt and unimportant. I've asked you in the past. It really hurt my feelings and made me mad. Okay, that's you saying what it is. I'll reiterate. We had an agreement that you would let me know if you were going to be more than 10 minutes late. Now,
What if they say, oh, you're being emotional?
don't say that.
Well, what if they say it? You don't have
Yes.
control over what they say.
That is correct. You can say, I don't appreciate you telling me how I'm being. I would love it if you could just listen with an empathic ear to what I'm saying. And then when it's your turn, I'll be happy to listen to you. You know, here's the thing, though. If you're talking to someone and they say, you're being emotional, you can also be clever about it to a degree and say, it seems like this conversation is making you uncomfortable. So now you're kind of name calling to end it. But I still have this request that if you're going to be more than 10 minutes late, you let me know. And I think it's a reasonable request. I don't think it's a lot to ask. So part of it is, I won't get sucked in. I will not take the bait. You're trying to distract me and get into a fight so you don't have to take responsibility for not getting in touch with me and telling me that you're going to be late. I will not be deterred. I will stay the course. You can name call, and I'm still staying the course. Now, that's going to take skills, right? But there are a million great books. I've written 3 of them that you can learn how to communicate in a healthy way. What is your desire, though? You have to know that too, right? Do you want to be understood? Do you want to win? Right? Because sometimes we go into these conflicts and we don't really want a dialogue. We really kind of want a debate. And I think you got to look at yourself honestly. Am I a good dialoguer or am I more of a debater? Do I want to just crush their theory of what they think happened? Or do I want to more deeply understand my person? And I think that how you look at your relationships has a lot to do with the way that you approach communication. If you can look at your relationship when you're in conflict and say, hey, this is not you against me. This is us against this problem. Us together against this thing. Always in your mind, standing up for this union that matters to you. And even with friendships, right? We're not at war. This is just conflict. But we never go low. And this is something that is effective communication 101. You cannot name call, disparage, bring up something from the past, bring up something that they told you in confidence that was tender to throw in their face to embarrass them. Really think about fighting dirty has got to be off the table if a relationship is going to make it. Because if you fight dirty, there's no trust. If you fight dirty, you're emotionally untrustworthy. So you're mad. No, I only said that because I'm mad. Yeah, but you can think that because you said it. You cannot take it back. So be really mindful that words as weapons is a real thing in relationships.
I mean, there's so much, so much to say.
So many
I mean,
things.
it's just like, I'm married. It's just funny because this type of stuff comes up all the time. I think, there are a lot of people. I mean, I find myself lucky to be in a relationship with somebody who will do what you're saying, and will go along with that. But a lot of, and there's a healthy meeting point of just being reasonable, but I think a lot of people find themselves in a relationship of the person on the other end is just not being reasonable. They don't want to be in the space with, it requires a level of emotional maturity, maturity within your own life, and if you're 23-year-old listening to this right now and you get in a relationship with somebody else and they're just extremely emotionally immature, it's you're just so far ahead of them. And this is what I want out of my dialogue and they're just kind of
establishing boundaries early and often in relationships when you're dating. People will be revealing to you who they are all the time. Believe them. Watch them. You establish. Let's just say you're dating and the person says, you live in Queens, they live in Brooklyn, and they pick a place to eat in Brooklyn. And you can either schlep all the way to Brooklyn or take notice that this person who wants to go on a date with you is choosing something that's convenient for them, inconvenient for you, doesn't care that you're going to be traveling back to Queens by yourself at 10 o'clock at night or whatever it is, right? And if you're healthy, you go, hey, that is not my preference. My preference would be that we meet closer to where I live because I don't feel comfortable traveling back late at that. The person may be like, oh my God, you're so right. I was so excited to bring you to my favorite Greek place. I didn't even think about that. I'm sorry. Let's definitely meet in Queens, right? It's not the end of the world. That doesn't mean that person's a terrible person. But if you don't say it, if you don't assert, you're already setting up that this relationship is going to be based on this other person's convenience and on your inconvenience. And you're basically,
a doormat, yeah.
Yes, and you're like, I'm okay with that by saying nothing. Is if someone says to you, I'm going to call you on Friday, maybe we'll go out Friday night. And then they get in touch with you Monday night at 11 and they're like, what's up? You're going to just say, oh, nothing, just got out of the tub.
But what if you're scared of losing the person? I mean, that's going through someone's mind, 100%.
Yeah. Well, the bottom line is better to lose them early if this is what you have to look forward to, is someone who doesn't keep their word, doesn't say what they're going to do. And you can do it. Matthew Hussey, who's a dating expert, has a funny comeback for this. He's got great texting scripts. And it's when I didn't hear from you Friday, I figured you just flaked. I ended up going down the shore. Anyway, I hope you had a good weekend. You mention it. You don't act like you own the person. You mention it oh, hey, I noticed. You said you were going to call. You didn't call. Not cool. Nobody even made you say you were going to call. Or there was another great example that he had with dating. Oh, someone being around your apartment late at night and being like, hey, want to hang? I'm on Avenue A or whatever. And you live on B in 11th, let's just say. And his funny comeback, and you're just starting to date them. You haven't even had a proper date yet. Is, ooh, you must be mistaking me with someone you had many more dates with. LOL, good night. Funny, cute, a little tongue in cheek. Dude, I ain't no holla back girl, or whatever it is you would be trying to, the message that you'd be trying to give. But again, that doesn't mean the person's a jerk. I mean, that might make me think the person's a jerk if you haven't even had a date and they want to come over to your apartment at 11 o'clock on a Monday night. But the whole point is, if we don't assert ourselves in these dating situations, you're accepting conditions that most likely will not be the conditions that will make you happy in your life. So you're like, oh, I'm afraid to rock the boat now. You know how much harder it's going to be to rock the boat in 3 years from now? So assert yourself. Don't even care. The last thing I did before my husband and I got together, I was single. I was already in my 30s. I was like, I don't have to get married. I'm no more unexamined minds. I would rather be alone than date another guy who hasn't had therapy, doesn't know shit about their own emotions. Like, I'm not into it. And I'd built this great life. I was like, I don't need it. I do not want it. So, of course, the moment that you can sort of let it all go, at least for me, is when it came in. And because I didn't care, the first meeting with my husband, I was like, he's like, what do you want? I literally talked for about 45 minutes straight. I want someone who's willing to consider having another kid, even if they already have kids. I want someone who wants to have a second. I'd like a lake house. I would like someone who has their own life insurance policy and who owns their own home, which he did. But you know what I mean? Like, I was so unafraid. And when I was done with my whole thing, he was like, sounds great. I was like, well, and I had a stipulation that I wouldn't date anyone who had not had 20 years of therapy. And my husband was 20 years older than me. My friends were all like, good luck. That's literally never happening. And I was like, hey, how do you feel about therapy? And he's like, well, I'm a big fan. And I'm like, how big? He's like, no, I've had a lot of therapy. I was like, if you had to approximate, he's like, at least 20 years. Literally, I was like, okay, I guess date number 2 can happen.
Yeah, one thing I was thinking about while you're talking is, I mentioned the whole idea of looking at life as a whole, and there's so many interconnected ideas here. Where would you say understanding the season of life that you're in, the limits that you have, right? So let's just talk about the person who's on the opposite end of maybe some of those texts that you're sending, right? They might be behaving that way potentially not because of you or because they don't want effective communication, but their life is so loaded with so many different things, and they don't have the capacity to be dating you right now. Like, it's just like they can't give you the attention that you deserve. And similar, if you're the person listening, how would you advise someone to think about all these different areas of life and, like, where to set boundaries? Because there must be like a middle point. Maybe it's like your values. Maybe it's something else that's driving you that will reconstruct the boundaries that you set. Because otherwise, everything just starts breaking.
Well, it's about how you feel.
Yeah.
Right? It's literally about how you feel. Why do we do a resentment inventory? Because we don't want to walk around resentful. So that resentment inventory becomes the GPS to where do you start to look at, do I need better boundaries here? Do I need to have a conversation with this person? Do I need to set a limit? So you can do that one resentment at a time. If that person, you gave a scenario and said maybe this person doesn't have the capacity, but that's on that person to say, you know what you're looking for, I don't have the capacity to give you. It's not on the other person to lower their standard of what they want. And I think it's really important that we're so transparent about what we want, because how will you know if it's a good fit? If I hadn't said all those things to my husband, I was so over playing the game. I was so over pretending. I was so over being the cool chick. I was just so over all of it. Guys who didn't know their feelings from a Frankfurter was so boring. And I was like, I have nothing to lose by just telling the truth about what I want, because either I'll meet the person and they'll want similar things and it'll be great, or I'll know in the first date. Same reason why I was never into people being super promiscuous super fast. If you're looking for a long-term relationship, and that's not popular now. Like saying that makes me sound old. People are like, what, are you anti-sex? I'm like, no, man. It complicates relationships. Other people will disagree. They'll say, there's lots of stories I've heard from people on the internet that say, we had sex on the first date, we've been married 30 years, it's amazing. I'm just saying, being a therapist in the trenches, mostly with women for almost 3 decades, I see how this complicates. If someone gets sexual too soon, because women have a lot of guilt about it, or they feel, now the person's calling me, but is it because they want to get to know me, or is it because they want to get laid?
Yeah, I have so many thoughts about this. We've had numerous sex therapists on this podcast. I think that sex, when it comes to boundaries, is a very interesting topic. I have a lot of respect for people that are sex therapists. I do think that some of the cultural attitudes have muddied the science around this subject, and I think we've been a little too accommodating for that in a way that's not accurate. I mean, because sex, there's an intersection of so many different things happening.
Yes.
There's attachment.
Yep.
There's I'm horny right now. I want to have sex. There's
Yep.
there's so many
Yep.
different
There's-
things.
Yes, friends with benefits.
Right. So there's so many different things, and this conversation around sex often gets isolated to it's just a physical thing that I'm just doing in the moment. And the boundary setting that comes along with that is if you look at the intersection between anthropology, attachment theory, okay, your sex drive, oxytocin, all these different things, I think the body of research would support what you're saying. And it's not a popular message in today's culture because hookup culture was a reaction to purity culture.
Yep.
And so, but it wasn't the answer to purity culture because purity culture was like shame, repression. I'm not even going to talk about my sexuality until I'm 50 years old and, whatever.
Right.
And hookup culture is, I'm just going to hook up with everybody. It doesn't really matter. We'll do it on the first date. And then you take the anecdote of the one person who hooked up with someone on a first date. Now they've been married for 30 years.
Yeah.
And then you ignore the 50 other people that it just blew up in their face.
Right.
And so I think the future is wisdom culture. Around this, right?
Yeah.
What is actually wise? You're not suppressing your sexuality and pretending it doesn't exist, which is ridiculous. But I actually think the other spectrum is ridiculous as well. And we say that's cool, but I'm like, that's hurting people.
Here's my thing. If you are not getting what you want, look at the way you're interacting, right? Because some people will say, whether they're polyamorous, it doesn't matter. Whatever if they say, I love what I'm doing. I love my life. Good for you. There's literally no judgment. I'm for people who are doing things and not figuring out how to get what they want. So when women would come to me and be like, I'm having sex with my ex because they're safe, because I know them. It does not hurt my dating prospects. It's not a big deal. I will say, I disagree. Because you're expending your sexual energy in a place which the urgency, you need that horniness, you need that desire, you need that drive to drive you in the dating world to be attracted to someone else. It actually is diminishing you as someone who's dating. And that is what I saw over and over again in my practice. I'm like, it's okay. You don't need to hook up with your ex. Contain that. Right? And let that be the energy of availability that lights you up like a spotlight, you know what I mean? So that people can kind of find you. So I think that you'll have a lot of different opinions about this. I just want to be clear that for me, there's no judgment. I share what I've experienced in the trenches with clients over many, many years. And modern day culture around sexuality has changed so very much. But human nature has not. Human nature has not. And even though what is acceptable socially has changed, and I think that's great, I feel like we needed a change from this, what it was, like you could only do it this way, you could only have 2.2 kids, you could only, you know what I mean? This was the only way to get into adulthood in the 50s. Obviously, all of that has changed, and that's great because it should be more of an open field.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I don't even feel like it's about judgment. I think at the end of the day, one of the things I'm trying to accomplish with this podcast, and we talk about this online, is I'm not trying to give people Matthew's opinion. I who cares about my opinion? And so I think at the end of the day, I think experience matters, right? Experience matters, but I don't think it's the only thing. I mean, I think you have a more spiritual consideration of what is this thing actually for. I think that's an important question to ask, not as something that's oppressing you, but what is this actually for? What is sex actually for? Then there's science, and I think science is not absolute certainty, but it based on studies and fields, there are patterns and probabilities that are really high, that if you were to take a population level data, then for 9 out of 10 people, it will end up ringing true. And then you have history, and that's where anthropology comes, and what are the people and the societies that have been studied, and certain behaviors, how did those shape those societies? And so obviously the average listener is not going to be holding all of those things together at the same exact time. But I think if you just look at how am I going to get the life that I actually desire?
Yes.
The intersection of those 4 things is wisdom, and it can't just be I feel horny in the moment and this feels right, and everybody on social media and these 6 different influencers are telling me that this is good for me. It can't just be your experience. It's like, what have people who have studied this for years, like yourself, actually say about this topic?
Right.
And I'm going to put more weight in that at the end of the day than, some person on social media who, is just throwing their opinions out there and being like, no, this is going to work for you. And so I just don't feel like that's about judgment at all. I really don't. I think it's about, hey, we love you and we want to help you. And if you're saying this works for you, okay, I'm not trying here to convince you, but if you want to listen, if there's something that's breaking in your life and this is just like blowing up for you, I think what you're saying like makes total sense. And so I think that's really, really important for people to hear, that it's not about judgment. It really isn't.
Super not. And definitely about me wanting you to get what you want and wanting to help you get what you want in life.
Yeah. When it comes to, we were talking about we were talking about before about the ways in which you would open up dialogue with somebody, and I think it was important to circle back. What are the phrases that are absolutely toxic to start a conversation with? Because you mentioned a few of them, like you always and you never, but I mean, that's just the air that I feel like I revert to a lot of that language just naturally. For some reason, I don't know why, but like, what are the conversation openers in a relationship that you should just never use that language?
I mean, anything accusatory. I can't believe you. I can't believe you said that. I can't believe you did that. You always, you never, again, those things. But let's flip it on its head and say, what are some sentence starters that you could use to invite into a dialogue? How about that? Because part of it is, it's, most of the time you don't really have people necessarily doing the extremes. They just don't know. They're right there. They want to have the conversation. They just don't have the words. And a lot of times it just comes out wrong. So if you're talking to someone that you care about, you can always start with sweetness. If it's true, you can always start with, I love that you always think to invite me to the stuff that you plan. And I have a simple request that you ask me before you buy the tickets because I'm not available on Wednesday. Right? Like that's an ask, that's a boundary ask, that's setting a limit in some way, but it's telling them you appreciate them thinking of you. People inviting you to things that you need to say no to, right? Because a lot of times we're suffering with the auto yes, where people are like, oh, we're going to, watch music outside, like, oh, my worst nightmare. And people are like, so yeah, Saturday, does that sound good? And if you immediately say yes, that auto yes puts you in a position when you know you're not going to want to do that thing when Saturday comes. Either you're going to get a fake migraine, right? So we just want to stop the auto yes. So what is the language to stop the auto yes? I need to check with my wife. I need to check my calendar. I'll let you know tomorrow, right? Give a maybe no, because it's way easier to come back and give an actual no if you haven't give an insta yes. So that's one way of sort of avoiding conflict, is just stop committing in the moment. Take 7 days, you guys listening to this. Take 7 days. No auto yesing for 7 full days, and see how much more manageable your life becomes. Right? We think people expect us to say yes, but you don't have to. You can say, I need to check. I need to look at my workload, but I'll get back to you tomorrow. I have a 24-hour decision-making policy, so I'll get back to you tomorrow at this time, right? You can use a little tongue-in-cheek, but that makes it easier to not have to then cancel at the last minute or whatever, because when you don't want to do something, you're going to find a way not to do that thing.
How would you coach people through, okay, you start practicing all these things and you potentially might start entering into harder conversations with people. They're afraid of rejection. And so like they're afraid of the person who's not going to receive it well. And I feel like that's where the rubber meets the road of reverting back into the boundaryless person. And so how do you prepare someone for that?
First of all, expect pushback. I want you to think about your boundary and your relationships like a dance. So for some people, your original dance troupe is your family of origin. So they could be the hardest people to set boundaries with because you've been dancing with them the longest. So expect pushback. It could sound like, I don't know what's gotten into you. I don't even know you anymore. right? Like being dramatic, people trying to make you feel bad. What they're doing, according to Dr. Harriet Lerner, is they're doing what's called a change back move. You're doing something different. It is messing up the homeostasis or the equilibrium in the relationship, and they do not like it. So they're going to be like cry, or they'll amplify it. You have to stand strong and say, I see that this is upsetting to you. I wish I could make it work, but I really need to be at work early the next day, so I can't do it. You stick to your boundary. I have a 48-hour rule that you can't take back any boundary for 48 hours. And if you wait 48 hours, you will not want to take it back. You realize nobody dies, nobody spontaneously bursts into flames. It's okay, as Cheryl Richardson would say. She wrote a book called Let Me Disappoint You. Just get used to it, people. Because if you never disappoint anyone else, then you know what's happening. Endless self-abandonment. So it's okay. Your wife can be disappointed and she can still love you, and you don't have to get a divorce.
Yeah, I think especially with your family dynamics and parents, it's like you've been living away for 20, 30, 40, 50 years, and then you start trying to operate a different way, and they don't like that you're changing the rules of engagement. And you start having some hard conversations, like, especially if it's like your mother. It's like, well, I don't want to. I mean, Frank Anderson talked about this with trauma therapist, had been traumatized, talked about this with his own parents.
Yep.
Caused friction.
It's hard, especially for parents who are not doing well with the next phase of your relationship, right? There's a new phase when your children become adults and start having spouses of their own and children of their own, if that's what they decide to do. There are some parents who can't stop parenting actively. They can't stop telling you what to do. They can't stop wanting you to center them in your life. And truthfully, that's not very loving, right? It's not. Like, the appropriate place for parents is, we want you to have your own life. This is what we did. We did it all so that you could build something beautiful for yourself. And yes, we want to be a part of it. But I had a client who was married to someone whose mother was just a complete nightmare. And she insisted that all 5 sons and their wives and their children came to the family house that he grew up in for Christmas every year. And she came in to see me because she was like, I'm not going to Wisconsin for Christmas this year. And if that means I get a divorce, I don't care. I'm not doing it. And we've worked the whole year up to her making her husband take a stand. And she stopped spending Christmas in Wisconsin. She did not get a divorce. But that's like an extreme example of a parent. She would get them all matching pajamas. Like, that is not a lie. That's actually a matriarch who has no life outside of the family system. So much pressure. It's like the moms who are like, my teenager is my best friend. I'm like, she really wishes you would stop saying that.
Yeah. I mean, so what would you say to the person? So you're starting to practice all this stuff. You're starting to develop some of these tools. We talked about this idea of flipping to the opposite direction and rigid boundaries. I actually feel like this is exactly what happened with the narcissism conversation. 10 years ago, that word came out, liberated a lot of people.
Misdiagnosed a lot of people.
Yes. And then basically what happened is everybody's a narcissist. We're going to put everybody in a category, and you start doing all these things like gray rocking and whatever, and applying them to situations where the person's not actually a narcissist, but you're now doing that. And I think the same way with this boundary conversation is, you could have just erased your sense of self completely, no boundaries. And then you flip to this other end of like becoming this like very rigid person who's not generous, who's not nice when they need to be nice.
Yeah. Or who cuts people off.
People off.
Right, because this is rigid boundaries. You're more likely to cut someone off than you are to tell them that they hurt your feelings.
Yeah.
But neither one of these are not, rigid boundaries are not healthy boundaries.
Yeah.
These are just two sides of the same coin, and the coin is disordered boundaries. So you could have these porous boundaries, which is the disease to please. You're the peacekeeper. You're the chameleon, right? In your relationships, that's what's happening. And if people want to know what they are, you can go to boundaryquiz.com. It's free, 13 questions. It's amazing. And then there's videos that come up to help you have better boundaries once you know what you are. And then on the other side, rigid, they're too firm. You're too quick to like cut someone off. It's like in life, you might sort of be the my way or the highway person. You might be more of a controlling type person with rigid boundaries. You don't like to be vulnerable. Even your closest friends may not really, really know like the soft part of you if you have very rigid boundaries because you don't share in that way. And neither one of these are optimal, right? What is optimal? Healthy boundaries, which is more in the middle of that, where you're able to tell the truth about how you feel. You can tolerate some tension, which is what you were talking about before. What do you do with people who are afraid of being rejected by their family of origin? It's probably not going to go that way. They're going to not like it, and eventually they're going to get over it, and your new normal begins. This is what happens. Even if you can't imagine it, trust me when I tell you, you have the power to change the way your relationships are. When you have really disordered boundaries in the too malleable way, you're allowing everyone else's reality to be more important than your own. But your job is to honor what you want. And if it's not to go home every Christmas to your wife's family's house wearing matching pajamas with her entire family and not having a Christmas tree at your own house, there has to be a conversation because how you feel matters.
How easy is that for the you've seen so many people over the years, the past 30 years, to live in that middle space?
I call it the in-between. It's not easy at all. It's an actual space. I write about it in every book because what happens in the in-between is that you're too healthy to do the shit that used to work. You've not yet mastered the new tools and strategies. So you're just sort of in this middle earth place of like, I can't agree to what they're saying because I know it's unhealthy and I don't want to do it. I don't know how to masterfully say what it is that I want to say, right? I don't know how to do this without crying or bursting into tears, right? Which is some of what happens during the in-between. But here's the thing. The in-between is not going to last forever. I promise you, you will get better and better. You're not alone. The fact that you're afraid to do this makes total sense. You shouldn't know how to do this because nobody taught you. You wouldn't feel bad that you're not fluent in Russian, as I said before, without somebody teaching you. But I promise you, if you can read, you can learn. I wrote an entire book that is like step by step called Boundary Boss. You have to get committed though. The same way you can't casually decide to learn Russian. This is what boundaries are about. You got to dive in. You got to decide, like, I want to do this better. And you can. And even if the person doesn't receive it well, that doesn't mean abort the mission. It doesn't mean you did it bad, right? Some people just don't want us to change because they're afraid we won't love them anymore. It's threatening. It's human nature. And it's okay to acknowledge it. I see this as upsetting. And I love you. I'm not going anywhere. And yet I really can't go on Saturday. I know I've done it for the past 7 years, and yet this year I'm not going. People can be disappointed, and you can not go on Saturday, and you can still be in a relationship with that person.
I mean, you've been at this for a very long time. Can you paint a picture of what life looks like for you now that you've been practicing this?
Yeah, and what it looks like for my clients who've really come to the other side, who've mastered the art. There's so much more joy. There's so much more expansion. Your relationships are so much healthier, and imagine your relationships, or I think about this with my husband, that he is a soft place to land over and over again in a hard world. And when you're in a healthy relationship, where you tell the truth about how you feel, where you don't do crap you don't want to do, where you say, like, this is a limit, I just can't do it, it is a soft place for you to land. You are known. Your original ideas matter. What you like to eat, how you feel matters. So we're not just going through life, going along to get along, because that is no way to live, right? Being known is what is on the other side. But joy and not being afraid, because I want you to think about, imagine if walking on eggshells was actually in your rearview mirror, and that you never felt that way again in any relationship. That's what's on the other side.
How long do you feel like that? I mean, I don't want to universalize this for everybody, but how long does that take if you commit yourself to doing this work for that to feel more natural than unnatural?
I feel like people talk about changes happening very quickly, meaning simply changing their mind about what's possible changes their internal state. So even if they don't have it mastered in the first 3 months of, I have a boundary boot camp course that people take that actually is starting in mid-July. I have another cohort starting. Even if it's, let's say, the first 3 months, you haven't mastered the art of something that you've been doing dysfunctionally for 45 years probably, but they're like, but I feel different. I feel lighter. I feel happier. I don't have this anxiety, this gnawing anxiety that I always used to have. I don't feel like I have to walk on eggshells. So a lot will change with the internal experience will change in a way before the external experience, because I'm walking you through the process. We always go in before we go out, because you have to have a compassionate and deep understanding of why you are the way you are. There's nothing wrong with you. Trust me. How you are with boundaries was incredibly adaptive in your childhood. You did a great job. Nobody even told us how to avoid pain, but we just figure it out. So that was adaptive then. It becomes maladaptive, right? Not good for you in adulthood. So you're just going to, one by one, next right action at a time, change those interactions. And it starts with awareness.
If you had to leave us with one thing about the, true cost of staying silent in the life that becomes possible when we stop, what would you say?
That it's a tragedy to go through this life and not be known intimately. Like, you are so worth knowing. You are so worth knowing. And if you don't ever master the art of this, you may never really, truly, deeply be known.
Well, thank you so much for being here. I feel like this was just, master class in conflict, boundaries, all of this stuff. And I think it's just going to be a game changer for people. So
Thank you for having me. It was so much fun.
yeah.